Like any good agent, we're here for the open house, for the closing, for handing over keys. But because we're realtors, we're here for so much more. Agents who are realtors volunteer at nearly 3 times the national average. We're working to broaden access to credit, increase affordable housing supply, and ensure fair housing for all. And realtors are bound by a code of ethics. We're here for it all. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors. That's who we are.
Are you still quoting 30-year-old movies? Have you said cool beans in the past 90 days? Do you think Discover isn't widely accepted? If this sounds like you're stuck in the past. Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. And every time you make a purchase with your card, you automatically earn cash back. Welcome to the now. It pays to Discover. Learn more at discover.com/credit card based on the February 2024 Nielsen report.
Ask me, ask Iliza anything. It's time to ask. Ask me all your questions. Leave them in the Instagram comment section. Leave them on your Twitter or leave them on your Facebook. We'll see them, we'll read them, then we'll give you answers. You know it, I've got it. I've got the answer, the answer. You ask me, I'll tell you anything.
We talk a lot about the environment while giving out wedding advice on this podcast and personal crisis advice. And, you know, in Don't Panic Pantry and in just the things that I talk about, I always try to talk about saving the environment and sustainability and doing what we can. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we had an expert on the show who knew just a tad bit more than me? So thank you for being here, Mark Bittman. Mark is the author of 30 books, including How to Cook Everything, which is a series, and the #1 New York Times bestseller, VB6, Eating Vegan Before 6 o'clock to Lose Weight and Restore Your Health for Good. He was a food journalist and columnist, opinion columnist, and the lead magazine food writer at the New York Times, where he started writing in 1984 and stayed for 30 years. Mark Bittman has written for countless publications and spoken in dozens of universities and conferences, and his 2007 TED Talk, which we have a question about in today's episode, What's Wrong with What We Eat, has almost 5 million views. His newest book, Animal Vegetable Junk, A History of Food from Sustainable to Suicidal, is the reason I have brought him here. Well, all of those amalgamation of reasons, but this is the thing we're talking about. He is at Mark Bittman on IG and Facebook, at Bittman on Twitter, and at the Bittman Project on Instagram, markbittman.com. BittmanProject.com. You guys can also use Google to find any iteration of him. Mark Bittman, thank you for joining us.
It's nice to be here. Quite the intro. Let's do wedding advice. I'd rather do that than the environment, you know?
Oh my God. It's all I want to do is rope people into questions from PhD students about how to make their boyfriend listen to them more. We'll do it at the end, but we had a lot of questions about this because my husband and I talk about it a lot, but it's time that people heard from an expert. So starting with, the first question comes from Anonymous. You've written so many incredible books covering the food space and continuously providing much needed education to your readers. How has your approach to each new book shifted over the years? How do you stay on top of all that new information about the food and environment every day?
Great question. It's not that great a question. It's a great question.
It's not a great question.
It's a really interesting question to me. I'm not sure my answer is that interesting. I'm compelled to find out about this stuff. I'm very restless. I had an interesting question. It's been a busy week for interviews, and I had an interesting question yesterday, which was similar. Things change, and I like to stay on top of this. And in some ways, you feel like, oh, I was wrong about this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30, in my case, 30 years ago. And I'd rather be right than be known as being wrong. So I'm really interested in this topic, and my interest has evolved. It's expanded. I started writing recipes, and now, Animal Vegetable Junk is essentially a serious contemporary history book and an analysis of a contemporary situation. I really like it. I guess that's the answer. I really like it.
Well, I think, of course, not wanting to be wrong. And we do live in a culture where if you say one thing once, that has to be your opinion forever. But we're at such a, I would call it a breaking point with our environment and sustainability. And we're getting so much new information. And I feel like people are paralyzed by options. So I think having a book like this that kind of lays it all out, maybe even a holistic view, is paramount, crucial.
It is holistic. I think that's a good word for it.
Dax is a name. Hi, Mark. 12 years ago, you did a TED Talk entitled What's Wrong with What We Eat, which is brilliant and still just as relevant to this day. I was hoping you could speak more about food companies, quote unquote, purchasing studies from shady institutions that further push their own agendas to make money. Of course, referencing the 2015 report on the American Society of Nutrition, how it's legal for food companies to freely fund misinformation without pushback. So please elucidate on this scandal.
I mean, I'm not an expert on this. All of that is true. It happens. Lying, I mean, it's a funny thing to say, but lying is legal. If you present things as information, they don't have to be true. So part of why false advertising is okay is that it's being presented as information, and that's defended as a First Amendment right. So,
can you give an example of that?
You can say almost anything is heart healthy if it's low in saturated fat.
Wow.
So, you can say sugary breakfast cereal is heart healthy if it's low in saturated fat. So, there's examples of it all over the place. I'm not thinking of any others right now, but you can fund a study. There are also regulations that say that, and this is recent, that the funders of studies have to be revealed. So if a study isn't peer reviewed, or if a study is funded by the Sugar Institute, it's not worth the paper that it's written on. You need to have studies that are independently funded and are peer reviewed. That means read by the studiers, the researchers' peers, the people with similar credentials. And that gives you some assurance these days anyway that the study is worth looking at.
Right. You want objective studies where the study was done not even necessarily to prove an agenda, but just to see what the information is.
Well, I mean, yes, ideally, but almost everyone is doing a study because they have an idea. They have a hypothesis that they want to prove. So they're biased in some ways, but it's different from having an hypothesis that's more or less objective than having a point that you want to prove.
Right.
And especially if you're getting paid to prove that point.
Yeah, so that's why I think you have to be autodidactic and read those labels, but also understand the labels and don't just read the advertising on the front of the box. It's about what's on the back of the box, or don't eat from a box. It's probably a good place to start.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of interesting, for example, if a study is a real outlier, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but I've read a little about it.
You are.
No, I'm really not. But I've read a little about it. I've talked to experts about it. If a study appears to have revolutionary information, suppose there's a study that says sugar is actually good for you. It's really great. Eat as much of it as you want. You are right to be skeptical. If a study is going against what has been common knowledge for a long period of time, if it's a real outlier, then it's probably not right. Either it's wrong or it's badly intentioned. So there's a reason that the weight of opinion shifts, or the weight of knowledge shifts in a certain direction over time. And that's because study after study after study after study after study, for example, confirms that junk food is not good for you. We see this moving in that direction. If a study comes out tomorrow that says junk food is fine, it's really good for you, there's good reason to doubt that.
I think that's probably why a lot of people are skeptical of the keto diet, which to me is just another iteration of the Atkins diet. Forever we thought fat was bad, but now it's good.
You are spot on with that, because as my co-author. I wrote a book a year ago called How to Eat with David Katz, who's an MD. And
I read an interview with you guys. Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. David always says, if the keto diet is so great, where are all the skinny people? Because why isn't everybody on it? Because Atkins started this thing, 40, 50 years ago? It's not like it's new. And if it worked, everybody would be doing it, but it doesn't. So a small percent, it might work for a small percentage of people. It certainly doesn't work from an environmental perspective. That's besides the point. You're exactly right. It's reasonable to be skeptical about new diets in general.
Absolutely. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. I know being thankful is on everyone's minds, and with thankfulness comes gratitude, a concept that honestly really bothers me. I'm tired of thanking everyone else. You know who deserves a thank you? Me. You deserve a thank you. When's the last time you thanked yourself? Sometimes it's hard to remind ourselves that we are doing the absolute best we can. So here I am reminding you to send some thanks to the people in your life, but mostly send some thanks to yourself. And a great way to do that is with therapy. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and it's suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and you get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time, no additional charge. You don't have to travel anywhere. They take the hassle out of finding that perfect therapist. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Iliza today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Iliza. Fall has fallen. Winter is on its way. The days are shorter. But just because, they feel shorter. And just because the days feel shorter doesn't mean your to-do list gets any shorter. You still have to power through your busy days. And a great way to do that is with nutritious food from Factor's no prep, no mess meals. At the end of a short day in the fall or the winter, the last thing you want to do is have to cook. Factor has got you covered from breakfast, snacks, dinner, anything in between. Factor has easy, nutritious options to keep you fueled, like their chicken Florentine with spinach and garlic chili cauliflower. You bet. That's what I want to make myself at the end of a day where I am exhausted and my husband isn't home. Whether you like routine or you enjoy mixing things up, Factor has you covered with 35 different delicious meals every week and over 60 additional convenience options you can add on, like keto cookies, pressed juices, and smoothies. And because Factor meals are chef prepared and dietitian approved, you're going to love not only Factor's meals taste, but also how they support your goals, even if your goal was just making yourself dinner. Head to factormeals.com/Iliza50 and use code Iliza50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. That's code Iliza50 at factormeals.com/Iliza50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. The holidays are here. And for a lot of us, the holidays mean decorating, hosting, celebrating. For me, it means a lot of traveling, and nothing feels better year-round, but especially during the cozy holidays, than a restful night's sleep in soft, luxurious sheets. Boll & Branch's signature sheets are made with the finest 100% organic cotton, and they get softer with every single wash. You already know that I got Boll & Branch this summer when I needed breathable sheets to sleep in, but this holiday season, I'm actually gifting some of my friends and family Boll & Branch's Ultimate Softness Bundle. I get to choose a signature hem sheet set in any color, a signature hem pillow set, and a waffle bed blanket. And they're all getting juniper because I think it's a classy color. This way, you know you have something nice to sleep on when you visit. It's the perfect gift for you and them. Gift you and your loved ones a better night's sleep with Boll & Branch. And right now is their best offer of the entire year. For 25% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets, head to bollandbranch.com/Iliza. That's Boll & Branch, BOLLAND branch.com/Iliza for 25% off. Limited time only. Exclusions apply. See site for details. Okay. What do you think is a bigger problem? What we eat or how it's produced from these big corporations and having large environmental impacts with a check to say they're okay? Or is it the media that pushes the same food agenda to as such?
Let's forget that media part because it was a great question up until there. So,
great. Answer the question you want to answer. Yeah, that's okay.
I mean, if the question is, what is the bigger problem? What we eat or how it's produced? Is that, can we sort of agree that that's the question?
We can answer that. Absolutely. Well, you'll answer it. I'll listen. I think it's just how do we make the kinds of choices that allow things to get better as we move forward?
Right. Well, the thing is that there really is an interesting question in there, and I'm not sure if it was your listener's intention or not, but what we eat is obviously an issue, but we don't have complete control over what we eat. Some of us lack willpower, some of us lack money, some of us lack time. And marketing, we've been talking about marketing, and what's available is what determines what we eat. So the question, of course, we can make better individual choices. Many of us can, not all of us can. Many of us can make better individual choices. But if we make availability of good food more universal, more common, that's a production question. What we grow determines what we eat. So if this is a real statistic, 60% of the calories that are available in the United States today are in the form of ultra-processed food or junk food, then we are going to eat 60% of our calories from junk food because that's what's out there. So to really change what we eat not as individuals, but as a country, as individuals, in theory, we can do whatever we want, but not all of us can. To really change what we eat as a country, we need to change what we grow, what we process, what we market, what we sell.
This is not a submitted question, but I have a thing about corn and what I know about it, the government subsidized farmers, I think coming out of World War II, so we have more corn. Should we be making less corn? Are we forcing ourselves to eat corn and we don't want the corn?
There's nothing wrong with corn, but like less than 1% of the corn we eat is like in the form of corn kernels. Almost all of it is processed into other stuff. So it's processed into animal feed, it's processed into junk food, it's processed into ethanol. We should, someone is going to ask in your list of questions is probably a question about food waste. Someone always asks about food waste. Food waste is a huge issue. We waste, a third of the food we produce. But we're also wasting millions of acres of land growing stuff that isn't good for us. So that's another form of food waste, is growing corn to process into junk food that then makes us sick, which makes us go to the hospital, raises healthcare bills.
Someone's getting rich off that corn.
Yeah, absolutely. But someone's also getting sick off of that corn.
So all the things that we're talking about actually raises my next question. And this is, my husband asked me to ask this question.
Oh, good.
Because this speaks to the accessibility of good food for people who aren't able to get it. What do you eat if you're poor? What should you eat? What's the best idea?
I mean, it's a fine question, but often for poor people, for people without money, time is an issue too. So the easy sort of glib answer to that is to say there isn't a single traditional diet that isn't better than what's available to most people in the United States today. So if anyone says, I'm going to eat the way my grandmother ate, they'd be eating better than if they ate the way most of us eat in America right now.
Less processed.
So if that's rice and beans, or if it's stewed vegetables with wheat, or, you can think of any country in the world, whatever the traditional diet is, any culture in the world, whatever the traditional diet is, it's better than what most of us are eating now. And it's also a diet that's been eaten historically by poor people. It's just that it's not that easy to get there. It's not that easy to. Some people don't have the time to make, traditional rice and beans, maybe with a little bit of meat, maybe with some stewed vegetables in there. It's just not that easy. So the question is, how do you make it easy? How do you make it possible for everybody to be eating a more traditional diet is what it amounts to. It doesn't even matter what the traditional diet is. Like literally every traditional diet is healthier than the standard American diet.
Absolutely. Yeah, because of course it's easier to grab a bag of Cheetos than it is to grab an apple,
Right.
a piece of broccoli. You got to make it.
Right. Imagine if liquor stores and 7-Elevens and gas stations and drive-through windows were all making healthy, solid, real, good food available at the prices that they make shitty food, if I'm allowed to say that, available.
Sure.
Yeah.
You can definitely say it on this podcast. And does that have to do with, I remember one time driving through Italy, stopped at a gas station, and they had like, nothing's processed there. It's like ham sandwiches, vegetables. And I always thought it was because we just have more people. Espresso. So then you'll never eat. So I just always wonder, is smaller batch, local farmers, is that a pie in the sky idea? Or are people just so greedy that we just want massive corporations feeding us because more people are making money? Is it all connected?
It is all connected, of course. It's not it's a pie in the sky idea to think we can keep going the way we're going now because the status quo is not sustainable. So something's got to change. It could change for the better. It could change for the worse. But if we're aware of what the situation is and we strive to make things better, then maybe we can make them better. But saying, oh, there's only one way to do it. We have to have these big corporations feed us. They have to grow thousands of acres of corn and soybeans and process all this stuff into junk food because that's really the only way we can afford to eat that way. Well, it's not true. And it's destroying the environment. It's contributing to climate change. It's poisoning our water, our land, our air, our people, blah, 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 blah. Well, everybody knows this stuff. So it needs to change. The question is, or one question is, how do you change it? What direction do you go in? It's a fine question to say, can everybody in the world eat in a sustainable way? And then the answer is, yeah. But it's not going to happen tomorrow, so it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, it's not the question that matters. But the people who support the industrial food system will say, well, we have to feed 10 billion people. Actually, we don't have to feed 10 billion people. We need a world in which it's possible for 10 billion people to basically feed themselves in their own regions, in their own areas, in their own countries. It's not up to us to say we're going to produce all of this crap and send it out into the world, and that's a good thing. It's not a good thing. It's not good for rich Americans, and it's not good for poor people in Africa and Asia and South America who are getting shipped this stuff.
Right. We need sustainable, smaller food systems that empower people regionally to feed themselves. It's the reason we don't have one global government. There's a reason there are smaller
right. Well,
government,
there's that.
state government.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah. Except we do have, in a way, there is one global government and it's multinational corporations. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. It's not like I think they're sitting around plotting to take over the world. But in effect, at least when it comes to food, global corporations are driving a lot of what determines how everyone eats.
Right, absolutely. Getting more granular, and there's no pun intended because this is not about grain. Tully_S says, I love, with several E's, which are silent, I love steak, but find it hard to justify the environmental impact. What's the best way to be sustainable while still enjoying my favorite food?
I mean, it's such a great question, and it's such an easy answer in a way, because the answer is you have to eat less of it. So there's an interesting thing about steak is a great example. I love steak also. If we say that maybe 5% of the steak, we're talking beef, in the United States is produced sustainably, and we choose to eat from that 5%, it's going to cost us a lot more money. That stuff is not as available. It's $15, $20, $30 a pound. But it's way less environmentally damaging. It's probably better for you. It tastes better. You just have to eat less of it. So if you see steak as, really a treat, and I've gone through periods, I mean, I'm with this person. I've gone through periods of my life where I'd eat 5 steaks a week, often small ones, but nevertheless.
Baby steaks.
My kids used to tease me because they'd come home from school and I'd say, why don't we just split a small steak? And we did that. And steak was $3 a pound at the time, and we're talking the 90s or whatever. But if you spend a lot more money and you look for much better meat and you eat less of it, it's sort of a win-win situation. You just can't, I'm sorry. My third interview today.
You're doing great. It's fascinating.
I like Snickers also, but I recognize that I can't eat them every day. So I
I
don't. It's a similar kind of thing. There's a lot of things I like that you just have to like be aware that they can't make up the mainstay of your diet.
I wonder if that really feeds into our American psyche of like, it's a land of plenty. Anything you want at all times as a kind of F you to the Russians. Like, we're not in a bread line. We're having a dinner party all the time. And this gluttonous sort of, not so much intention, but entitlement to having everything all the time because you can, because it's cheap. And really the better way to be is, this is a special steak that I got. And I think it makes it taste better when it's a special thing. Just like a candy bar. If you eat them every day, you're going to lose a foot. It's not so special.
Right. That's the other thing, is that there's a, we're audio only, I assume, but there's a chart that looks like a big X. So if you just imagine a big X, as cost of food goes up, cost of healthcare goes down. As cost of food goes down, actually it's like this. As cost of food goes down,
still an X.
Cost of healthcare goes up.
Wow.
The less you pay for food, the sicker you are. Look, we are, I don't know, the United States was always in the top 3 or 5 in longevity, length of life. And now we're like 40th. We're one of the sickest countries in the world. We spend more on healthcare than everybody else does. Right. And this is all about, largely about, if I say all about, I'm exaggerating. When I say largely about, I'm not exaggerating. It's largely about our diet. What we eat is making us sick.
100%. And because we're American, we fight so hard to protect it.
Yes.
Like, is it the worst?
That's our right. That's our right. Our right to eat what makes us sick. That's what makes us special.
You'll pry this candy bar from my cold, dead hands, my bloated, cold, dead hands. Jonesing for Journals asks, I do what I can. What's the best animal product to eat, if any, that has the lowest environmental impact? And how do we know when seafood in grocery stores is sustainable?
Those two great questions. These are like awesome questions. Fish is was that a he? Knows that fish is the answer. Right. Okay. Sorry.
Could be. I don't know who Jonesing for Journals. We'll just.
That's a tough one. That person knows the answer is fish. And there's an interesting, I'll just get slightly technical for a second. There's a thing called conversion ratio, and it basically means how much food do I have to feed this animal in order to produce a pound of flesh? Okay, so for beef, it might be 10 pounds of grain for 1 pound of beef. For fish, for a variety of reasons, it can be almost as low as a conversion ratio of 1. Like, you can feed it a pound of grain or whatever, a pound of food to grow a pound of fish. It's a little more than that, but in some cases, it's not much more than that. So fish is by far the most sustainable, but there are so many problems with fish, as again, the listeners implying. Overfishing is a problem. A lot of forms of fish farming, aquaculture are problematic. And then we could get into contaminants and so on. But overfishing is probably the biggest problem in fish. And I think the answer is you can't buy fish in a supermarket. I'm sorry to say this, because for years I supported ways of trying to figure out how to be able to buy fish in a supermarket. I think there's really, at this point, there's 2 ways. I mean, you can buy from the fisher person themselves, but that's not practical for most people. There's really 2 practical ways to buy fish. One is to buy it from a fishmonger you trust. And that's not a guarantee, because the fishmonger doesn't know all that much. But if you have a well-intentioned fishmonger and they have a good line, they say, here's what I'm trying to do. And a lot of it involves really buying, to a large extent, buying fish that's caught or raised in the United States. I mean, you can tell I'm not a chauvinist, but the United States does a better job on fish, as it happens, than most countries do. So if you have a fishmonger you trust, and they're trying to get most of their fish from sustainable sources in the United States, and they talk a good line and you believe them, that's a pretty good way to buy fish. These days you can buy fish, and we've met some of these people, and we have them on our website, on Bittman Project. You can buy fish direct from people who are either fishers or buying straight from fishers. A lot of that happens either in Alaska, Seattle, Washington, the Northwest, and the Northeast. It's happening more and more in New England and Eastern Canada. And that's, fish gets shipped no matter what. So people say, oh, I don't want the shipping and blah, blah. Fish is going to get shipped. It might as well get shipped.
Fish is going to get shipped.
If you could, it might as well get shipped to you from as close a source to the boat as you can manage. And I think increasingly that's a way to do it. That's one positive upshot of the pandemic, is I think we've expanded our notion of how we get good food. And it's funny because I'm an advocate of local food, of course, but I get a lot of fish I get some fish from Alaska because I know I can get it pretty much straight from the fishermen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you'll feel better about eating it. I also think that there's something, we're not eating wild cows. They need to be fed. And fish are in the wild feeding themselves. So it's even cheaper, better for the planet in the long run, as long as they're not eating tampons.
If it's wild fish sustainably caught. Those are big qualifications.
So this person, I guess, you live in Iowa or something. So they're asking if you go to Whole Foods or something, is there like a blue check mark? Is there an Ocean Project stamp? Like, how do you know?
Well, since Whole Foods was never entirely trustworthy, but since it's been bought by Amazon, who the hell knows?
Even less trustworthy?
Yeah, who knows what's going on?
Do the research.
Kroger, if you're talking about the Midwest, where the biggest chain is Kroger makes noise about buying and selling sustainable fish. I haven't done like an investigation into whether they're buying Stop and Shop, which is the biggest chain in the Northeast, I think, is owned by a Dutch company called Ahold, and they make a lot of noise about buying and selling sustainable fish. So I don't think it's impossible. But, you have to kind of look at the label or see the box or say, where is this stuff from? And you have to
Where's it coming from?
You have to believe the answers.
And I think that's interesting, too, about American fish, because we think, it's Chilean sea bass, which is a made up thing, or it came from Japan. And it's like, eat a river trout. Eat something nearby. Eat it from Florida. It's okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
A lot can happen between falling in love with a house online and owning it, between imagining living there and breathing in your new home for the first time. Having an advocate who can help you navigate the complex world of financing, inspections, negotiating, analyzing the market, and talking through any anxieties that may pop up, that can make all the difference. That's what the expertise of a Realtor can do for you. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors and bound by a code of ethics, because that's who we are.
So finally, fall is here. I have been looking forward to it. I have had a hard year in a good way. I had a baby. I have been on a nonstop tour, nonstop traveling, and it's been hot. So I'm looking forward to, of course, pumpkin spice, everything, cooler weather, and slipping into a cozy sweater from Quince. I've talked about Quince before. Quince has beautiful leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim, and so much more. All Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. Dressing expensive doesn't have to be expensive. Their clothing is beautiful, it's durable, it stands the test of time, and it's what I like to call a capsule wardrobe. I got an Italian wool cocoon coat. That's one of those, it's got like a European collar and it covers my butt so I can walk around New York City and not be chilly. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/Iliza for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/Iliza to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/Iliza.
Nina Priestley. Hi, Iliza, Emily, and Snow Peach. And Mark, what's a great alternative or an easy staple for something that's gluten-free, nut-free, and meat-free? Eating healthy is often so expensive, and it's so hard to be good for the environment and our bodies when junk food is so much cheaper. Well, that's a lot of boxes you're ticking there.
Wait, gluten-free, meat-free,
And
and
nut-free.
I mean, a lot of junk food is hardly gluten-free. And if gluten is your thing, then you know what gluten-free is. But most grains are gluten-free. All legumes are gluten-free. Every single green vegetable is gluten-free. I mean, gluten-free, nut-free, and meat-free is almost the entire vegetable kingdom, except for
fruit, maybe?
Except for nuts and wheat. So
right,
this is not that challenging a question.
It's not that hard. And also, isn't it something insane? Like it's like 2% of people are actually celiac or something like that.
Yeah, but I don't want to. You and I talked half an hour ago. At this point, I guess, about fad diets and trends and so on, and for people who are not eating gluten because they think that not eating gluten is somehow a panacea, that's a mistake. But in addition to the 2 or 3% of people who are celiac and who really can get sick from eating gluten, that number's going up. And there are people who seem to have gluten sensitivity that are not celiac. And we don't know why there is. And anecdotally, I'll bet you've heard these stories, and I've heard them. I've heard this same story 10 times. And the story is, I can't eat bread in the United States. I can't eat wheat products in the United States. And I went to Italy and I ate wheat products and I was okay. And I've heard that story enough times so that I think there's something about the varieties of wheat or the way that we're growing wheat here that's changed, and that's wrong. And it's either the variety or the pesticides that are being used or the way it's processed or some sensitivity that some people have developed. I mean, I don't pretend to know what this is, but I do know that more people have just like, you might not know this, but when I was a kid, everybody ate peanut butter all the time. That was like just staple was peanut butter. And now, you're not allowed to bring peanut butter sandwiches to school because so many kids are allergic to peanuts. Well, what happened? That's not made up. What happened?
Yeah.
Something happened.
Or were they quietly dying when you were a kid and no one noticed it?
That was it.
Maybe just no one noticed.
I was wondering where those kids went.
I mean, to support your argument, I took my honeymoon in Italy. We're eating pasta all the time. No one around me is fat. Every woman is like a lingerie model. And you come here and we have like Maggiano's and Buca di Beppo and everyone's being wheeled in and whaled in a barrel out. So it's definitely the sugar and the chemicals and the way that we make it.
Yeah, part
and
of it
there's
is
this war on
size
wheat
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of it is portion size too.
Oh my God. Italian-American food is such a departure from what actual Italian food is.
Who knew?
It's tasty. Who knew? We knew. Someone knew. Someone knows. Megan Mountain Sprite says, hello, the indomitable Mr. Bittman. I've been getting through the never-ending merry-go-round of quarantine meals, partly with the help of New York Times Cooking. Mark's recipes in particular have great bang for your buck. Okay. My question is, when your motivation to cook every single day starts to wane, where do you turn for inspiration? How do I know what cookbook will get me out of a rut? Do you have a favorite cooking podcast? Farmers markets are still a no-go here in Washington, so I'm starting to struggle. Please help. Thanks, Megan Trumper. Yes, that's my last name. No, I don't want to talk about it.
We love Megan Trumper.
We love Megan Trumper.
And she called me indomitable, too.
She did.
I had days. We had my kids living here. Some of my kids living here, some of our kids living here last summer, and we were cooking up a storm. I mean, and going through tons of food, and when fall came, my partner and I were living alone. Again, we'd look at each other and we'd be like, "Can we just skip dinner tonight? Let's just could we just have cheese and crackers?" Or
right.
I mean, I think there were 2 nights in the last year we basically had ice cream for supper. It's like, could we just have ice cream for supper? Because I just can't stand the thought of it. So obviously Megan's experience is, if not universal, then common. I don't know. For me, it's like a day goes by. If I rest a day from cooking, if I get really sick of it and I rest a day, then I'm interested in it again. But I'm a freak because I've cooked almost every day for 50 years at this point, and not too many people do that anymore. I don't know. I think, there's a cookbook for everything. So if there's some kind of food you're really missing because you're in lockdown, whether it's Thai or Armenian or Peruvian or whatever, go get that cookbook and figure out how to make the thing that you're really craving, because whatever it is not going to be that hard.
Right. It's not going to be that hard.
I mean, you can make sushi. There's nothing you can think of that you can't make yourself. I mean, almost nothing. You can't make a Dorito yourself, but I mean, real food you can make yourself.
Oh, a homemade Dorito. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants your mom to try to solve it for you. Caitlin Connolly, 47. What's your favorite I don't like cooking meal that isn't takeout? And what staples do you always have on hand to make healthy, sustainable meals? So we'll tackle the first part.
What's your favorite I don't like cooking that isn't takeout? What's left?
It says I don't feel like cooking meal that isn't takeout.
I do make, when I want to, when I have a half hour to cook and eat, and I don't really want to deal with anything, and I want something better than a tuna fish sandwich, I make pasta. I usually turn to pasta, or I make a little omelet, some scrambled eggs, stuff like that. I mean, really the old simple things. I have become good at, and I'm not bragging. I'm kind of known for making really good stuff really fast. And I like doing that. So I'm not in that particular position so often.
Is it all
the staples question? I mean,
I was going to say, is it all from your head, or do you ever do you ever reference your own book? Do you ever reference how to cook? I reference
my own books if I forget stuff.
I love, okay. But
how do you use gelatin? I wanted to use some gelatin the other day. I was like, don't you have to soak it in water first? Because I haven't used it in 10 years. She asked about staples too. And I have really a well-stocked pantry. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I was going nuts because I love to go to stores, and especially specialty stores, and buy tons of weird stuff. There's a Korean supermarket not far from here that I just was like, I can't go to that supermarket. I'm going nuts. But I usually have 5 or 8 kinds of beans and the same number of whole grains. And I have I have seaweed, and I have dried shrimp, and I have rice paper, and I have rice noodles, and canned tomatoes and stuff like that. I mean, I think the more you have in the pantry, the easier it is to take one fresh ingredient and turn it into something really amazing.
Yeah, if you have the motivation. So you mentioned, how many kids do you have?
2.
So you have 2 kids. Aaron asks, this question is for Mark. Well, I would hope so. I love cooking and trying new foods. My daughter's 12 and she doesn't like vegetables or new recipes or anything other than macaroni and chicken nuggets. Do you have any tips on how to get her to eat anything else?
Man, the chicken nuggets thing. I mean, my kids are adults, so it's not like I'm grappling with this situation anymore.
But you must have at some point, right? Or were they always omnivores?
Well, I did. I would say, should we have a small steak? I think when my kids were growing up, we would say, here's what we're having for dinner. You can partake in this dinner or not. And if you don't want what we're having, you can go figure out what there is in the refrigerator. And we didn't have, and 12 is certainly old enough to do that. We didn't have chicken nuggets, but we would have. I mean, they weren't really as common then as they are now. We would have. And that's not such a terrible alternative if they're high quality chicken nuggets. I mean, look, the kid's going to outgrow it. I think the best thing you can do is set a good example. Say, here's what we're having. We're having pasta, a piece of fish, and a salad. Or we're having, beans with little meat and rice and a cooked vegetable. This is what we're having. This is what we think is the way that we should be eating. Why don't you join us? And eventually the kid will. Or worst comes to worst, the kid leaves home and it's not your problem anymore.
At 12, the kid set out to find Taco
she's
Bell.
Leave in 5 years, so.
Right. If you could choose any other topic that you could suddenly be as knowledgeable about as you are about food, what would it be?
Wow. I mean,
we won't hold you to the answer.
There are so many aspects of history that I'm interested in. I think it would be some of that. But, sometimes I think if only I had specialized in football, I'd really be into it. But I mean, this food stuff is really meaningful. And that's been the saving grace. In a way, we go back to the very first question that came to you, which was like, how do you maintain interest? How do you do this over the years? I started by reviewing restaurants and cooking recipes and writing about that. And now I'm writing about these really serious issues in food that affect people's lives. And that's a really cool thing. I'm really happy that I specialize in that. So I guess if it were anything else, I'd want it to be equally meaningful, much as I love like reading about football and other stupid things. To make it a career, I'd like it to have some meaning.
I love that answer. And I also think what's fascinating about food and your career, and it in a weird way, it's ever evolving, our conversation about food, but in a strange way, a lot of things have always been the same.
Yeah, you're right.
An apple's always good for you. What inspired you to create the Bittman Project, and how has it changed or affected your interactions with readers? You get feedback so much more quickly than through a book.
I mean, what inspired me? I think what inspired me is the people I work with. One of the people I work with is my older daughter, Kate, and she was working with me more and more on more and more projects. And there were 2 or 3 other people, one of whom I've worked with for, I think it's 20 years. She'll remember better than I do. Another started working with me when he was graduating college, and now he's 35. So he's been working with me for 12 or 14 years. And a third, fourth, has been working with us for only a few years, but I've known her for probably 10 years at this point. I wanted to be able to have all of these people working for me and with me, and have them be making a living and creating their own careers. And what's interesting about the Bittman Project is that although my name is obviously on it, I'm not always front and center, and other people are more and more front and center. And, your listeners are not looking at me, but obviously I'm getting older. Everybody does. And we are producing a tremendous amount in terms of recipes, in terms of interviews, in terms of conversations like this one, which obviously take time and preparation. All of this stuff we're doing now as a team, and I'm at least the spiritual leader, if not the physical leader, but it's named for me, and it's named for me because I have a following. But we are trying to do new things. I don't boss other people around. We're tackling different subjects. We're saying things in different ways. Obviously, I'm 20, 30, 40 years older than the people who I'm working with, and they have different ways of looking at things, and I respect that. And I think that I guess I just didn't want to be just another OWG who was like, living off his reputation or doing the same thing that I've always been doing.
Right.
I mean, cookbooks are still, I love cookbooks. And obviously you can tell from this conversation, I love cooking, and I cook new things all the time. And that's great, but everything is changing, and you can have so much. I mean, this podcast is a perfect example. You can have so much direct contact with the people who are interested in what you're doing. And, when I first started out, even when I became sort of popular, I'd get like 4 pieces of mail a week. And, and they'd be like handwritten things from old people, who had nothing better to do. And then it accelerated email and now, you could respond. I could respond to 1,000 people a day if I want, directly if I wanted to. So we do. It's like everything has become kind of the way radio always was. That is, you're broadcasting, but you also get so much back from. And honestly, I think there's less hate stuff and less bitterness and less meanness than there was even 6 or 12 months ago. That's my experience, is that
what could it have been?
Yeah, what could it have been?
What could it have been?
We seem to have made the Bittman Project, we seem to be connecting with people who, I mean, obviously they're fans. They're people who respect what we're doing. So we get occasional, like we posted some stuff about yesterday's verdict this morning, and the George Floyd thing, and we thought, okay, we might get a bunch of hate stuff, right? We don't know everybody who's subscribing to us, and it's like really positive response. So I think we're connecting.
There's enough stuff that, you can follow there's enough avenues out there, and there's enough information. People follow people that they love, and we kind of only do that, and we don't factor in any, there's no time. There's so much information out there. And especially with something that you're doing that is only coming from a place of seeking information, love to an extent, making the world a better place, not necessarily vilifying a specific person. And this is about making people better. I don't know who, I do know who wouldn't like that, the people making Doritos, but for the most part, for the masses. So this podcast is called Ask Iliza Anything. People write in about all kinds of things, but we have 2 non-Bittman specific questions, and I would love to ask your advice. We do this at the end.
Do we get to do wedding planning questions now?
I think one of these is a wedding. I see the word wedding. I'm going to read you 2, and then we'll do top of the cob, and then I'll release you. Anonymous. I'm a 28-year-old female, and I have an older sister who's 31.
Wait, how old? She's a what? How? You cut out for a second.
Oh, sorry. She's a 28-year-old female. She says, I have an older sister who's 31. We usually get along great, but I've noticed some changes between us over the past year. Late 2019, I got engaged, and my now husband and I got married in December of 2020. Throughout the engagement and up to the wedding, my fiance and I noticed that my sister and mom grew much closer. And when we would get excited about things related to the wedding, the excitement would be reciprocated, or we would not be reciprocated, or we would get judged. And we would end up toning down our excitement around them. Aww. Fast forward 4 months married, and my husband and I put in an offer on a great house and showed my mom and sister. Again, we were very excited. This house is a dream home for us while making them. But during the walkthrough, it made it seem like they wanted to be anywhere else but there. Any thoughts?
This wasn't directed specifically to me, was it? Just because I know so much about life in general.
But this is perfect. But it was Bashert that we had it for this podcast.
I love it. We're doing a podcast, Kate, my daughter and I primarily, but it's a Bittman Project podcast, and we keep trying to think of like unusual stuff to do. And one of the things we think of doing is like wacky questions. So here, for me, this is a pretty wacky question, but isn't the answer like totally obvious that they're envious?
Oh, it's so obvious.
Right. So what are you supposed to do? I think all you can do is like, in the best possible spirit of love, you have 2 options. In the best possible spirit of love, you confront them and you say, I wish you could be happier for me. It seems like you're not happy for me. I feel like you're envious. And that makes me so sad because I love you so much. That's one option. The other option
if you do.
Right, if you do. The other option is, right, and especially if you don't, the other option is, fuck them. What are you going to do?
I go with that one because no one's going to admit. She's not going to be like, you know what, you're right. We're really jealous bitches and we hate you.
You don't say you suck, you're really jealous. You say, I love you and I want you to share in my happiness. And I feel somehow that you're not as happy for me as I want you to be. Someone could figure out how to say this really well. I may not be the right person, but I'm pretty sure those are the 2 options. You either say, I'm not talking to you for 5 years, give me a call, or come on, get with the program. I'm in love with this guy. We're super happy. We're going to buy a house. We want to invite you for dinner. We want you to be happy for us. We want you to be part of the family. But it's only if that's the kind of family it is.
Right, which it probably isn't.
Yeah,
Not everyone is a communicative New York Jewish family like ours. So some of these people,
listen, my family
it's
is terrible. So
I'm looking for one more wedding question, but
I would like you to answer that one also. But I guess we agree on pretty much.
We agree. Because we don't have a ton of context, so I don't know, is the sister always kind of a bee about it? But I can say, having had friends who get a little wincy when your light shines bright, you are not under an obligation to dim your light because of somebody else's rods and cones.
Yes, right.
We want to find you one more wedding one, and then we'll do top of the cob. Hi, Iliza, Emily, and the whole pod squad, and Mark Bittman. This doesn't need to be anonymous. My name is Elizabeth. Longtime listener, first time writing in. What do you think of this wedding dress? I'm going to show you, Mark. I know having you look at a picture on a podcast doesn't make for the best listener experience, but I'm also afraid, I'm so afraid of dress regret. I could honestly use some humorous validation from my favorite comedian. Keep in mind, my venue is a mountainous, rustic barn. All right, Mark, I'm going to show you the picture.
Wow. I can't wait. I mean, she's beautiful, right?
What are you going to say? What a beast. What are you going to say?
Well, I guess that's true. But it is a little, that doesn't scream mountainous rustic barn to me.
Okay, that's fair. Right. It's whimsical. So if you want to be the most pristine thing there.
I mean, look, she loves it. You can tell she's happy in it. Isn't that what matters?
That's what matters. It's also, Elizabeth, not an ugly dress.
No, it's a nice dress. That's true.
It's a nice dress, and
no one's going to
well.
scoff at you.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful dress. For those of you listening, it's off the shoulder. I lack the lexicon to properly. My wedding dress was one material. This is a lace overlay. Mark, how would you describe it?
I would say as long as it costs less than $200, I think it's a really good buy.
Oh, boy. Oh, she's going to be wearing a Ralph's bag and some Crocs. She says, my wedding isn't till May of 2022. Elizabeth, do not buy the dress yet.
Right. No, calm the fuck down.
Yeah. But keep that place reserved because they're going to but just wait.
And invite us. We want to see you in all your glory.
And we want to know what you're serving. More importantly. All right, Mark, this part of the podcast is called Top of the Cob.
Why?
It's the top of the cob. We're doing it right every day. You just take a bite, top of the cob.
I've been thinking the same thing since, late January. No, late January. I have the same answer since late January. Donald Trump isn't president anymore.
That's your top?
That's absolutely every day I wake up and this is really good. Donald Trump isn't president anymore. And actually, the world is a better place.
Definitely.
I'm 70 years old. You haven't been able to say the world is a better place every day for 100 days in a row my whole life, I can tell you. So it'll wear off. But as I said before, there's kind of a window of optimism now. It's I feel like the curtain is lifting. Stuff is getting better. I do feel like that. I could be wrong, but just as.
But isn't feeling it half the battle?
Well, for this, we're talking about what I'm feeling. We're not talking about an objective measure. That's why I had to ask you if it could be trivial and not well thought out. But my life is good, but. I'm a relatively happy person. I have a lot of good stuff going on, et cetera, et cetera. But I got to say, when Joe Biden got inaugurated and when he started to say good stuff and when Donald Trump went away, I just feel like life got better.
Yeah, definitely a weight lifted. My top of the cob is not as huge as that. It is when my dog stretches, I like to take her back legs and her front legs and pull them a little bit more so she gets a little bit of an extra stretch like you get at the end of a Thai massage where you're like, does this hurt? And I think she appreciates the little extra stretch we get out of her tiny body. Yeah. Bottom of the cob, My bottom of the cob is looking at cartons, boxes, and seeing how they always tout what isn't in the product so that you don't ask what's in it. Like, this almond milk has no pork. You're like, well, it's not supposed to. So this
Free.
What's your bottom? Yeah, gluten-free. And what's your bottom of the cob, Mark?
I mean, I kind of bummed out today because yesterday I was prancing around and it was spring and I went for a run and I was peeling off layers and it felt all great. And we just had this thunderstorm come through here and now it's like 40 degrees and it's supposed to go down to 25 tonight. And I'm bummed out about that. Minor, obviously.
Minor, but it's still valid. It's still a bottom of the cob. Well, Mark Bittman, I'll read your credits again. I just threw the whole interview in the trash, in the recycle.
Where are you?
We'll move, Iliza. I'm in Los Angeles, and judging
are.
by that chair and that wall, I think you're in the Northeast.
Yeah, I am in the Northeast here.
That's like a Connecticut chair.
Well, I'm in Putnam County, about 50 miles north of the city. But
Okay.
I'm really lucky because my partner runs a nonprofit that's on a farm, so I get to live on a farm.
How wonderful.
I think it's
Oh,
really
I love
great.
that.
Yeah.
We thought about getting chickens here, and then we rethought it.
Chickens are awesome. What town do you live in?
We just live in Hollywood, like in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I don't know how awesome chickens are in Hollywood.
There's a
Unless
lot of
are you
coyotes.
up in the canyons?
We're up in the canyons, but I definitely have late night camera footage of foxes and coyotes sitting on my patio furniture. So
You
perhaps
need a
we
coop.
spared the
You
chicken.
need a coop for chickens. So yeah.
Got to get a coop. Well, folks, if you found this interview fascinating, and if you want to know more, you can follow him at Mark Bittman on Instagram and Facebook, at Bittman on Twitter, and please check out Bittman Project on Instagram and markbittman.com and bittmanproject.com for all things relevant to food, sustainability, our world, and our place in it when it comes to food. Mark Bittman, thank you so much for taking time
Thanks
to
for
be
everything.
here.
It was really fun.
Really great
Take
meeting you.
care.
His newest book, Animal Vegetable Junk, A History of Food from Sustainable to Suicidal, is out now, and it is very important.
The holidays are here at the Home Depot, so let's get to decorating. Find your perfect tree in our huge assortment of shapes, sizes, and styles. Like the easy-to-assemble Jackson Noble Fir, with pre-lit branches perfect for styling with all your favorite ornaments. Or the Flock Starry Light Fraser Fir, with over 1,900 pre-lit memory wire branches that keep their shape so it's ready right out of the box. Ooh. Find the perfect tree now at the Home Depot.
Buying a home is one of the biggest financial decisions you'll ever make. Before you tour a home, the real estate professional you're working with may ask you to sign a buyer's agreement, which describes the services you'll receive, each party's role and responsibilities, and how your agent will be compensated, all of which you'll want to discuss with them up front. So work with an agent who's a Realtor. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors with a duty to honestly represent you and put your interests above their own, because that's who we are.